Thank you. Good evening, everybody. We have a group of panelists today, a magnificent group, and they have work in the 22 South Carolinians exhibition. And we definitely are talk today about identity and community. First, I'm going to introduce the candidates or the people that we have here today. First, we have this J.Renee on the right. J.Renee practices the techniques of reverse glass painting. She has had solo exhibitions at Ponder Art Gallery at Benedict College in Columbia, South Carolina, and McKinney Museum of African American Art, and the International House Hotel, both in New Orleans. Her paintings have been in group exhibitions in New York City, Charleston, South Carolina, Washington, D.C., and New Orleans. She was featured in several Haitian exhibits at the United Nations, Mokada Museum, CCADA Art Institute, all in New York. J.Renee's work is in the collections of Southern University of Louisiana in Baton Rouge, the W.B. Du Bois Museum in Ghana, and the McKinney Museum of African American Art, just to name a few. She holds a BFA from Xavier University of Louisiana, New Orleans. Next, we have this photographer, artist, and community connector, Michael Dantzler. Is the owner photographer of Michael Dantzler Photography, where he specialized in portrait documentary and fine art photography. From a very young age, Michael has always had an uncanny ability to study various towns and cities, internationally crafting best practices for his home turf. Currently, he is focused on creating a healthy, dense arrangement of small businesses and creative community for talent retention in his hometown, Eastover. Recently, he has been contacted by the town of Eastover in creating a monthly newsletter and engaging the town's social media presence. Plus, he has recently kicked off community initiatives, get involved Lower Richland to stir community engagement by spotlighting makers, farmers, artists, leaders, and business owners in the interconnected Lower Richland area. Michael Dantzler. And next we have this Malik Green, born and raised within Columbia, South Carolina, has always seen it as his duty to uplift the place in which he comes from. Green is a South Carolina-based artist who began creating professionally in 2019 after graduating from Coastal Carolina University with a Bachelor of Science in Psychology. The art practice of Malik Green is primarily self-taught in art forms such as manga illustration and fashion design, help the artist develop a strong passion for uncovering his truth through his creativity. Being from South Carolina gave Malik the opportunity to learn the value of organic growth, and through the work, he desires to convey a certain level of roughness. Storytelling. One of the demonstrate beauty and energy flaws include his work as considered a method of storytelling. Being able to understand where he comes from has ultimately given him the opportunity to realize how far he is able to go. Malik Green. And also on the website, we did have B Dukes. They were supposed to be here, but travel restrictions prohibit that. So we definitely want to give her a clap that she's our presence. Okay, let's dive right into it. How's everyone doing this evening?
Good.
Good. Well, we got a chance to talk about your work, and I had a chance to see a little bit about your work, and I want y'all to explain a little bit more about it. But I want to start off with a question, and the first question, and any of y'all can chime in. The first question is, does art reflect or produce cultural society?
Yeah, I think it directly reflects it. I feel like with art, and with any creative medium in itself, that is the primary focus of what you are doing. A lot of times you can get disheveled and pushed aside because of the different things that world may throw at you. But in reality, you're supposed to be relevant to your culture, to your identity, understanding what the zeitgeist is and being able to understand the little nuances within it ultimately makes art that can last for hundreds of years because it's timeless. So I believe so.
And how has art sustained social change and movements within your practice?
Hello, everyone. For me, I think social change depends on what time period you're in. So most definitely, if you look back in history, the Cubist movement, what influenced, can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? Hello?
Yes.
It's on. Hello. One of the movements that I loved was the Afro Cobra movement in the late 60s and 70s. And now that we have a lot of social change because we have this technology that kind of it moves us forward. Internationally, we can see what's going on the other side of the world, that not only our culture, but other cultures will influence our artwork. And I think it's very important for the movement, for any kind of statements, the Me Too movement, the Black Lives movement, the women's movement, civil rights movement. There were a group of artists that projected what was happening at their time. And it's very important because, like you were saying, 100 years from now, somebody will look back at this time and see what was going on. So we're kind of the visual historians of the times.
This is for Michael. I know that your work deals a lot with community and community structure. And it reminds me of photographer Gordon Parks or Dewey Bay. I was wondering, can you talk a little bit more about your practice?
All right. Being a photographer for about 11 years, I first jumped into photography just as a historian, I guess, collecting family history. My mom took me around to different family members in Orangeburg and Calhoun County and just taking me to family members. So it just started as a documentation. So I'm forgetting the question already, but as far as the community element to it, the village element, that really seeded something in me. And with photography, it sticks to me to this day, 11 years later. And the reason why I chose the two pieces that I chose, I wanted to show connection, because right now we're in I don't want to jump towards a whole nother question. We're in a whole different time where image is cheapened because we see so much images right now through our phone and this everyday technology. So images can be cheapened right now. So I'm very intentional about showing very unedited, very in-depth, home, messy images, because I think we need to see messy. We need to see a mess sometimes. We need to understand that life is messy and there's a process. And so, but yeah, I'm very thankful for my mom for taking me out there, seeing family, seeing the challenge, people who dealing with challenging times, dealing with good times. So, and being able to record that and just love to record what's happened organically. I'm just a lover for that. I'm just a lover for spirit. Yeah.
Excellent. This is about your practice again. What is your responsibility of the artist to society? What's the responsibility of the artist to society?
In my personal opinion, I think the responsibility of an artist is to be authentic to themselves. And if they're able to do that, that is what serves the society well. Like firefighters and police officers and doctors, those are very objective based, occupations. Those are meant to provide help to the world. But for an artist, you subjectively provide help for yourself and the world if you're able to pull from yourself something transparent, because one cure for a doctor isn't the same as this one painting that helps someone see that life is worth living, and that could be applicable to a million different people, so you get a personalized experience from that. And I think being authentic to yourself is what the artist's responsibility is. A lot of artists have a lot of difficulties navigating through life and making sure they're balancing out something that they love passionately with being able to maintain the everyday things that their contemporaries have to experience, for me personally, I was born into this life to make art, I feel, and to do things outside of that sometimes feels like a distraction. So my responsibility is to fully nurture myself. And if I'm fully able to nurture myself, that provides the seed for growth for the world. So although it may sound selfish, it's very hard to water anyone's garden unless your garden is watered. And for an artist, it takes a lot of isolation. It takes a lot of focus, a lot of intention to be that. And ultimately, I think the artists who dove deep into that and truly pulled from themselves the truth of what they wanted to convey through their art, they serve their responsibility. And that's why their art lives past their physical, you know, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, could I add to that?
Please.
Yeah, so oh man, you touch on a lot. So you touch on a lot. But responsibility to society. And my origins come from growing up in Pentecostal Holiness Church, and like having this moral compass in me and all of that. So it seemed like where I'm built in, I'm programmed to have social responsibility to the community. So, but the one thing, the responsibility of an artist, the one thing I take advantage of right now, I treat my artist card as a passport. I can walk into anywhere. I can talk to anybody. I can translate what they're saying, whatever language you're saying or whatever vocabulary or whatever I can translate. I can be in a boardroom. I can be with the homeless. I love the fact that I can go in any room. I can talk to any person and translate what they're saying and see value in everyone. So, and sometimes it's a burden. It's being able to see the wealth in everybody. Sometimes I want to turn it off. Sometimes you have to turn it off. Sometimes isolation is necessary because you're nurturing and you're watering everybody else's garden. Sometimes you need to just go home and water your own garden. Sometimes you need to sweep in front of your own front door. So I have to remind myself to do that. But I really love being out there. I love being out there and doing certain things like verbal judo, and it's like a dance with me when I talk with people. I'm actually like watering their garden. They don't even know it. I get them to say certain things, and it's almost like it's martial arts. It's so many things in so many ways. It's a dance on the most basic level. But to water people's garden, to get them to see things from a different light or whatever. And they're like, oh, I never thought about it. Or if they don't get it, they might be pissed off at the moment. Like, why did you say this to me? I don't want to hear this. And I like those moments because I want people to be pissed off, because maybe that seed will flourish or grow 10, 20, 30 years later, or even beyond my life. I think about that. So I'm just over here just watering carelessly. I'm trying to be a little bit more carefully watering right now, but I'm the reckless guy. I like to water all over the place and just throw it on your face sometimes. But I think that's my responsibility. It's kind of a translation of my Pentecostal holiness growing up, because we had the most prophetic people in my church growing up, and I give them so much credit. So I guess in that way, I don't want to be a preacher. I feel like there's 1,000 churches around already. So I'm doing my work in my own unique way. And as I forgot to put in the bio, I'm back to community gardening right now. So that's one of my ways, but just watering the Eastover right now. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, I'm going to add to that. You guys touched upon a lot what I was saying. Sometimes when we talk about personal responsibility to society, are we saying that we need to be responsible and have limitations? Because a lot of times when you think about responsible and you want to say something that may offend somebody and create something that may offend somebody, are we actually being responsible? Correct? So when I first was listening to that question, I was like, well, are we, or as artists, in any kind of field, we are free. We're like the true freedom riders, because they expect us to say and do and create sometimes things that are just not pretty, or things that you want to see, because art is so multifaceted that our responsibility is to our work and being, like you were saying, focused on doing what's right for us inside, but hopefully the viewer would see that and not take offense if it crosses the line. And that's the only thing I wanted to add, was that as far as being responsible to society, I don't feel like we owe society. I feel like we're projecting what we want, and we're the true people who work free and we're truly free in all aspects and forms.
Okay. All right. This is another question for you, J.Renee. I was wondering, your work definitely reminds me of a little bit of like Rauschenberg mixed with Lorna Simpson. And I was wondering, with your practice, how do you start off a piece, basically, in your storytelling when creating your work?
You mean the actual technique? Or you mean the technique, or just how I start with the whole creation, like starting the piece?
The whole creation.
Okay. So this particular series is a family series. My great-grandmother passed down a lot of oral tradition. And as a child and growing up, excuse me. I was like in my early 20s when she passed, which was almost 100, and her sister was almost 100. So I was blessed to have both my great-grandmother and great-great-aunt, did quilting, and they had all kinds of weaving and basket weaving and things like that. They were very creative, but also she was the only one out of 9 kids that was interested in keeping the family together. So for the last probably 7 years since I came back to South Carolina, I actually took those stories and wanted to create those stories through paintings. And so this piece could have just been a painting, but I wanted it to be an installation because I wanted to have so much going on. So I started with the painting first. First of all, because reverse glass takes a long time to do. So I needed that time. But as I develop things, I add as I go into my studio and see what's hanging around. I have all these shelves. I have all this stuff hanging around with extra stuff, with the bottles, with fabric, with paper. And as I work with reverse glass painting, you have to wait until it dries and turn it over to see it on the correct side. So once I start going through that, then I can go ahead and start adding things. And that's how really my process starts. So it starts actually with the painting and the process of reverse glass, which is painting backwards on the glass to be seen in the other direction on the front side. Wow. So let's put it this way. If you are painting a canvas, what you put last on the canvas, like your signature, highlights, detail, that goes first on the glass and you move back. So as it dries, you constantly are moving. And then once you see the design and if it's flowing right, then you can add other things if you're doing installations. And they come as the painting evolves.
That's amazing. Let's start with another question. This one is it possible for the arts to transform a community or a neighborhood? Since we're talking about community and identity.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I know so actually. So like I can give a personal example. Like
please do.
I recently had my first solo opening up at Stormwater Studios. Shameless plug. Last July, and for me, it was an amazing opportunity to show my art to the world. But it was even more than that. It was an amazing opportunity to get my community into a space where my community has never been purposely welcomed. That's not to say that any organization ever has pushed away anyone who's looked like me, but where I'm from, I don't know too many people who make art and do what I do and have put that effort into reaching to a community. So for that show, for an entire 2 weeks, Stormwater Studios was completely filled with Black people because of my support and because of their support of me and their belief in me. And something that simple is the change that can make my little nieces and nephews say, well, this is something that I can do, and this is something that can become something larger than myself. So a community that has the opportunity and has a platform to support, you never know what they do until you give them an opportunity to. So with something as simple as me making art, that gave them an opportunity to say, well, I should be able to come to these spaces and I should feel welcomed in these spaces and I should be able to see artwork that looks like me in these spaces. Having this artwork in here, like you were saying when you introduced everything, it's amazing to know that this artwork has been here for 5-6 months and we've become a part of the museum at this point. We aren't just loaning our art to the museum. We aren't just saying, here, you can get this for a month or so. This is us actually saying we have left our mark. We've left our imprint on here. Whenever they look back at that 30 Americans exhibition that travels across the world, we can sit down and say this 22 Americans, South Carolinians exhibition is something that has become a staple here. And that is very much so due to the artists who were able to convey their truth and really unearth themselves through their art. So I definitely think that artwork has the ability to affect communities because we are sitting in a community that's being affected right now, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah, I got to jump on that question too. I like that. So I want to definitely give credit to the South Carolina Arts Commission, their initiative Art of Community Rural SC that I have been a part of for the past couple of years. Started out as a photographer, now Maven for Richland County. But one thing that they did to really open our mind, and they showed us other examples of different art events that stir up community engagement in different towns around South Carolina. And it just really stirred me up how important a farmer's market or artisan market, or even more, I'm going to give a Columbia example, 2 Columbia examples. If you ever studied the history of First Thursday, understand what these, the transformation of these 3 blocks. I think we're at 1600 right now, maybe 1700. But on these few blocks, Hampton Street, Washington Street, Lady Street, how art has transformed. We're usually the vanguard. Artists are the vanguard of community development. Sometimes you can say gentrification, whatever you want to put your spin on. If you're local, you'll know what gentrification is. You'll know what community redevelopment is. You'll know the whole story. But I'm gonna stick to community redevelopment because I love that. But I watched the transformation of the investment. It's multi-level, but it really started out with the art, with renewing. The community with showing up, with breathing new life, breathing a new interpretation into a building that may have been forgotten. The whole area that was like, oh, this old drafty looking paint. I mean, have you ever like put paint on the wall? You painted a white room gray and it gave you a mood. You paint that same room orange, it gives you a whole vibrant room. It wakes you up as soon as you walk in there. So yeah, art has that effect on a community in so many ways. Could it be murals? Could it be? I'm a fan of rituals. I'm a fan of church. I grew up in church, of course, but rituals as far as like like First Thursday. I look at this as a ritual to like I remember when we had the parade. That's very important, and also another element that's very important for Columbia: the success of Main Street. Soda City Market, I think has been around for almost 10 years now, where it brings artisans and it brings food trucks, and it makes it, you don't have to have $1,500 a month in rent to have a business on Main Street. So you have a chance to have a low startup cost to be on Main Street, and now it has such a massive following. Everybody want to bring their family here to Soda City Market, and now other people starting their own market, so it spreads out. So there's a lot. Artists kind of like we start the fire, like the olden days, and we pour the paint. We bring new life. We bring new spirit. We bring music. We bring the food. All of this is art, and we. Things that you don't even think is art. I mean, food is art. If the food tastes good, if it's interpreted a certain type of way, it makes you feel a certain type of way, that's art. So I'm going to go ahead and just digress from there because I can go on and on. But yeah, art is everywhere. We are the vanguard for what you need. One of the last things I'm going to say, one of the last things that I'm disappointed about for being an artist, sometimes we get used to be like, okay, we need you for this. We need you to add some light to the community, and then the artist is forgotten. But at the end of the day, art is always needed when times get dry, when money get low, when you need something interesting. What do you do, government? Invest in the arts.
Well, I have a story. I'm going to try to make it short. When I was probably your age, early 20s, my very first gallery exhibition was at a gallery called Chimera. It was owned by a Greek woman and an Iranian woman, and all the artists. I was the only African American artist there. So coming out of Xavier University, like you, Raishad, under John Scott, he helped me develop an idea. I was doing these realistic, before the glass paintings, I was doing these realistic canvases, bigger, larger than life, of African American, kind of modern, contemporary images. Realistic, but the colors were abstract. They were greens and blues and orange. Like a lot of people are doing that now. I did that what I'm telling my age, almost 40 years ago. But so my first show with these large canvases and lots of African American, African Afro motifs for the backgrounds were in this gallery. And it was on a street. If you're familiar with Charleston, King Street is like the upper echelon, all the antique galleries and antique stores and jewelry stores and galleries. So this was that street. And I was so excited about it. But they called me in. They said, Jay, we need you to come in for a minute. We'd like to talk to you. And I was like, oh, my goodness, what's wrong? Right. And they were amazed. And I was amazed because people who walk up and down that street that were African American never come into those stores. They never see themselves represented in those stores. They are going to probably do dishwashing or waiting tables, or they're maids. They were, especially at that time, we're talking about like the 80s, 90s. And things have changed, for us socially as African Americans and our jobs and being able to do things. But she said, if you could she said, we wanted to talk to you because we just wanted to let you know, because you're not here to see the faces, the smiles, and people stopping in the window that are African American. They're looking at your paintings. They're coming in and they're asking, can they even walk in the place? And they were like, yes, of course. But they're like, well, who is this? And how good they felt. And they were just amazed by the work. And I found that even when I do things in schools that maybe are not the best schools, the worst school maybe, in this city, the kids are like that too. And it's almost like this is when we have the representation of us changing society and the way we look at ourselves. And I knew at that time in my life that whatever I did with my work and how I would change my work or recreate or reinvent myself, that I always, even if it was a hard situation, like, the piece that I have in there is about a slavery situation, I wanted them to feel good. I want people to look at the work and feel good about themselves. And they were the ones who brought me in to talk about what people were saying and thinking and looking because at the work. And that made me feel good. I felt like I was going in the right direction with my work, and yes, it does help society and community.
Okay, excellent. This is for you, Malik, and then y'all can chime in as well. You talked about your piece that was that's in the show. I think about an accident or something like that. And with that, the question is censorship, is it justified in your process, or how do you feel about censorship when it comes to making art?
I kind of have like a love-hate, and I'm kind of young of an artist, so my style is something that is expanding in itself. Like I'm very, very young, so the potential for what I can create is very, very large, and I love that. But within that, I also understand that there are limitations and you should respect people through art. I love seeing the artists who are able to be artists who seek for like trigger warnings and things like that. When I first started making art, my original intention was to be as triggering as possible. So a lot of my artwork was focused on like religion or politics or things that that get people riled up. Like I might make paintings about sports now because that's something else that really gets people into it, But I grew away from that because as a Black artist, I feel like we already have to dig ourselves from a place of our artwork having to be contrived. And we have to make artwork that depicts a struggle, or we have to make artwork that depicts pain and oppression. And I can't do that. And I learned that very early in. I was a stressed out amateur artist 2 years into it because I made artwork that triggered people, but you can still get that same emotion without hurting or conveying pain of the people that you love the most. So for me, a lot of my artwork now, it depicts Black people in normal situations, living normal life. When I make artwork of myself, I don't censor myself because I can do what I want. I make figurative art. I'm my favorite subject. So for me personally, all of my personal issues that I deal with, I love to put them within my art because that's my form of therapy, Things like loss, family, addiction, struggle, just things like that. I can relate those things to me. And I feel as if I'm able to do that perfectly fine. But with my family members and the people that are around me and my support systems, I try to censor what I convey because ultimately, for a lot of viewers, it's not a lot of viewers' business about your direct family. It's about the sentiments that you create within artwork, I feel. So I don't censor myself, because if you see a painting of me nude, I want you to know that that's me nude, because these are my direct feelings. But I would never paint a family member of mine nude unless I had their permission, because I want to elicit a certain feeling from my artwork and my personal narrative. And like I said earlier into it, I can't really supply anyone anything unless I supply myself, and I love being the catalyst for my artwork. So to answer your question, I don't censor anything relating to me within my artwork, but I censor a lot of things relating to my family, or find intricate ways to incorporate these factors to show a certain level of veneration for my loved ones. You know, I have a really nice painting that I have of my grandfather, and as opposed to it being a well-placed photo or a nice photo of him from his past, it was a photo of him in his transparency, you know, with his vices around him, with his pain around him, with his struggle. And I didn't have to censor that, because certain artwork, you want to convey a certain message while also respecting people. And he's no longer here with us, but if he saw this artwork, he would feel respected within the artwork. So it's all about respect. People appreciate you when you respect them, and my artwork isn't meant to disrespect. So, you know.
Really well said. Anybody else like to chime in on that?
Yes. In the case of my pieces, in the gallery, I picked some of the safest images ever when you look at it from one light, and then in another light, it probably doesn't address censorship, but I wanted to address. I just wanted a little mess. I listened to a lot of funk music, a lot of jazz music more than anything. Grew up on jazz, and jazz is very interconnected to gospel music and growing up with church. So I take it as my jazz and making sure I was like, I love the fact that this slow cooker pot without the handle is in the photograph. And I was just telling my mom, I was like, Mom, I see the Ross label on I just noticed that on the olive oil in the photograph, and I'm very intentional about that, because I want a little bit of mess. I want a little bit of blue notes. I want some in between notes. I don't want it played straight. I don't want any Kenny G. I want some John Coltrane. I want some Miles Davis. I want some Bitches Brew being played on my image, and that's what's happening. Like in the image, it's a lot going on, and it takes the eye on a journey. You're on a journey, and you looking, and for most people it's familiar. Food is familiar. It's a universal language. Everybody needs food, but I wanted a little bit of mess, because everything. I'm one of those people. I love minimalism. I love a little neatness and all of that in one aspect, and then sometimes I don't want everything to be too curated. I don't want everything to be too well placed and too staged. I want a little bit of mess. I want a nice little rhythm up in there, a polyrhythm up in that photograph. So I look at my images as music. I think of it as a whole band. I don't know if you've seen Chris Rock, no slap, but but when I think of Chris Rock, his series about tambourine, when he talks about the analogy of playing that tambourine, you never see a mad tambourine player. So everybody has a role. You have the bass player who got the background. So I think about that in composition. You have the lead singer who gets the focal point of the image. And you have the singers, you have the keyboard player. Everybody have a place. And when everyone's doing their part, it makes a beautiful fusion. So that's what I think about censorship. And that's kind of like I'm sorry, Mom, my middle finger to society about everything being so perfect and curated, and you can't have any things on your face, and this whole retouch society that I'm just sick of, because I like real. I like seeing some pimples. I like seeing stretch marks before it was a thing. I like natural hair before it was a thing, before it was popular. We need this. We need to value who we are. And when we go into overly too much, everything must be curated and clean and all of that, it becomes very it's not good for humanity. So humanity is a balance of both worlds. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. We are getting to the censorship part. I feel as though artists, like I said earlier, are free. the people who are in charge of showing your work are the ones who are going to actually be censoring, right? Because they may say, oh, you're crossing the line with this, or this is too much. I remember during the Me Too movement, and I cannot remember the artist's name, forgive me, but there was a woman, they had a big exhibition, and this woman did these silhouettes out of mesh, you know, and it was actually of a woman being possibly gang raped. It was like one woman being raped, and she had all these men standing around, and it was silhouettes. I was horrified by that. But as a person that has never happened to, and then we have a bigger obligation when we start talking about politics and, you know, making rules about what we can do as women to our bodies, it was horrifying to look at that piece. But obviously she wanted someone to feel something. Because if that hadn't happened to you, who are we to judge? So, you know, I'm sure a lot of people were like, okay, this is too much, you know, and they could have censored it. But whoever the curator was thought it was appropriate for what the show was going to be about, for them to have that piece in there. And that was the first thing I thought about when you said that. Like, what is too far, right? And it wasn't a painting. You know, you could see it. It was all this mesh. It was very creatively done, but I was horrified. And I thought to myself, well, you know, she's trying to evoke an emotion for people to understand like what it is for physical violence towards a woman, and for people to stand around and maybe not do anything about it. And I don't think there should be any censorship. I think that you should do what you feel. And that's why we're here. Because we're going to say or do or create what other people may be thinking or not thinking, and they don't want to talk about it. Or they don't want to, you know, see it. You know, want to close their eyes to it. And it's something that we need to be aware of.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. So we're going to open the floor up for some questions. Yes.
Thinking about community, larger communities at society, what we've kind of gone through these past couple of years through the pandemic, these lows, the death of George Floyd, the killing of George Floyd, us watching that, and then we have today, you know, Taji Brown Jackson being confirmed to the Supreme Court. And I'm just wondering how all this kind of plays out in the mind of an artist. You know, you go here to here, literally, sometimes days apart. So, thoughts on that?
As far as today, Miss Jackson, Judge Jackson, about time. But also the ups and downs with society. There are some ways I have to take it in. Because I feel like mainstream, I feel like the news picks what they want to spotlight. I'm very critical of the media, mainstream media, in doing that. When I think of local examples, I think of examples in Eastover, I think of examples in Columbia. I'm thinking of examples that has never been filmed. Yeah, so it's really outraging, but I really like that these moments when they hit the mainstream and the mainstream is discussed, because I think about the civil rights movement, what happened in the South and the sit-ins and people getting food thrown in their face. On a local level, there probably wasn't as much outrage, but when it made the national stage, people were embarrassed. South Carolinians were embarrassed, so some changes were made. And I'm gonna bring up a more recent example, the Confederate flag. I'm kind of frustrated in this, but I feel like the Confederate flag came down because South Carolinians were embarrassed about Dylann Roof, and it made the national stage. If that story did not really make it out, that flag could still be they're flapping away and all of that. So I'm very thankful for mainstream media in that aspect, and also at the same time very critical. I'm trying not to be a pessimistic with media and think as a conspiracy theorist and be like, why did they select this story? Why didn't they select that one? But I'm thankful for the mainstream society. The more people that are discussed, the more people are accountable. They make people accountability. The outrage, the conversation that happens, the inner conversation that people have with themselves. Like, oh, I'm this type of person. Do I know any Dylan Roofs in my circle that I need to talk to? Do I need to lay hands on them so they won't do nothing like that? Do I need to like do some verbal judo with them? So I appreciate the media. But to address your question even more, as an artist and having the sensitivities of stuff, mental health is very important. Doing I don't like, it seems cliche, but self-care is very important when having these sensitivities to everything, to local level, to state level, to the national level. It's important to have, but to also be grounded in reality, not ignoring and like, oh no, this racism doesn't exist. You're going to encounter it one way or another. So being a realist, but know your position and stand in your position. I know my position. I'm not the most vocal person racially, nor do I want to do that. I may have the conversations face to face, over some beers, over people that don't believe stuff. The same thing that I believe, I'd rather do that. I don't want to do it on Facebook because I might want to shoot somebody. So I'd rather do it face to face with someone, and maybe if they're open to hear my perspective, yes. If not, I'm not even gonna waste my time, because I feel like as a black man, as you mentioned earlier, I don't want to overly prove my existence. And I'm human. I don't have time to be proving myself and hey, I'm human. Oh, my language is valid. Or the way I do things is valid. No, I don't have time for doing that. No. That's kind of like where my middle finger, like, I'm gonna do this, and you're just gonna have to accept it. And I'm glad that is happening now. And those are some of the things I can say about social media and all these. Some of these things are becoming more accepted. People are a little bit more tolerant. They may be a little bit more understanding for all of these things. So we are making progress overall, slowly but surely. And all this, it's going to take time to die. Racism is going to take time to die. Systematic to reverse all of the stuff that we actually built. We built America. And now to reverse it and to get our credit and all of that, it takes time. It takes patience. And I think at the end of the day, as long as we know securely what our role is, we're good. And we can't do it all. We cannot do it all. Don't ever feel like you got to do it all. That is not your job. You ain't God. I'll leave it at that.
And we are talking about Ketanji and the yin and yang, right? I think that I was excited, and knowing that my mother was the person who came from South Carolina, but also lived in Memphis when Martin Luther King was shot, with my father, who's from Memphis, and being a product of that generation that came after the civil rights movement and going into integration, actually, that just like you were saying, things are going to change. What I loved about probably most people, and my mother was saying the same thing, is that the fight was multicultural. You saw so many different races of people out there saying that this isn't right. But I think the reason why is because of that phone that I don't like, the cell phone. And people started seeing it, because sometimes when you tell someone, oh, this is happening, they're like, oh, no, this is not really happening. And so what has started happening is they started seeing it for themselves, and they were horrified. And they're like, well, this is really happening. And what I think is beautiful is that my kids, who are in a school with different, races of people, they're having these conversations, and they're saying, no, this is not going to happen. So what maybe somebody thought, 100 years ago or 50 years ago, that's not going to happen. And the one thing I realized when I started talking to people, even when I was doing my artwork that's dealing with George Floyd and the flag coming down, is that a lot of the older people were so surprised, and it was almost like a breath, like, wow. Like, the youth are getting it, and they're getting involved, even putting their lives on the line to march, to have conversations, to talk about what's happening. So even though you have something negative happening, and even in this, we have the judge that, I didn't like the way they handled her, as a woman, probably the most qualified is going to be up for the oh Lord, I got a blank. But
Supreme Court.
Yeah, Supreme Court. I got a blank. Age. But things are going to change. I mean, my grandmother used to sit there and tell me, she was a teacher. She graduated from South Carolina State. Her brother, South Carolina's educated, went to New York, could vote, came back to South Carolina to have my mother in the 40s, and she couldn't vote. And here she's a teacher. She couldn't go to the library in Marion, South Carolina. She wasn't allowed to go to the library, and she was a teacher. And so what she used to say to me, and she said, you are so lucky that you get to do what you want to do with your art. I wish I had $1 million so I could just support your art. She said, I couldn't do that. She said, because I wanted to be a piano player and an actress, and she said, I got married instead and became a teacher. She said, you guys have all these opportunities. So when you listen to the elders, you realize that even with my age and the next generation, things are slowly changing, and you can take a breath a little bit, but never sleep on it. And so I hope I answered the question.
Yes.
Well, my mother moved away at 17, and she's an alumni at Xavier University at 17. And we would come every summer, and all the holidays and Christmas are here. So my memories of South Carolina were just absolutely fabulous, because I had all these wonderful stories passed down from my great grandparents. Like I said, my great great aunts, cousins, my grandmother, she saw Sarah Vaughan open up for Billy Eckstine. So you're sitting there listening, and you see things in books, and you have somebody who actually lived that experience. So for me, it was always a beautiful thing, because I spent a lot of time in New Orleans. I went to Xavier and stayed in New Orleans to Hurricane Katrina. So when we were moving around, I said, you know what? I want my kids to have that experience that I had. My grandmother was still living, and I wanted them to hear those stories. And because the weather was beautiful and this, that, and the other. The one thing that did make me want to leave South Carolina, but the universe was in perfect order. It said, no, you need to stay here, is that Confederate flag. Because as coming here so many times, I never remembered that flag. And it was such a big deal. It was, and I was like, why is this flag here? So I would call my friends from other places, New York, DC, New Orleans. I was like, do you know they still have this flag flying around? I said, and I don't understand. I don't ever remember as a child seeing that, atrocity, like there it is in my face. And I said, I don't know if I can stay here. I don't know if I can stay here. And, but it's kind of like New Orleans with the crime, you love the food, the culture. And then when they had all the crime, you just kind of like overlook it. That's kind of what happened here. I had to look at all the beautiful things and the positive things about South Carolina, and the things that made me feel good about South Carolina, to embrace South Carolina and the people. This is a truly Southern tradition. People wave at each other. I would tell people, you should see people. They don't even know me. They just wave. It's so wonderful and friendly. And those are the things that kept me here in South Carolina.
For me, South Carolina definitely isn't the final destination for where I want to be at. Just being realistic. But I feel like the artist, one responsibility I have for myself as an artist is to be expansive and to figure out the world and figure out how I can lay my mark on the world. So to even make that a full circle type thing, like my family isn't large, but I'm from Columbia, South Carolina, born and raised. Like you talk about Eastover, love Eastover, Hopkins, all of that. That's all where I'm from, So, for me personally, I don't feel much responsibility as an artist to necessarily stay. But as a man, I feel a great deal of responsibility to show my family some form of consistency and strength and growth. And you can obtain that from actually being there and being tangible in that experience. You know, I went to the same elementary school that led to the middle school that led to the high school. So I've developed a sense of community. And, you know, like you were saying, the artist that left out, he may not have had that same feeling of community. And some people go leave home to find community, but other people create community through love. You know, so for me personally, like I say, my foundation is love. And I don't have a lot of family members, but the love that they have given me has been so impactful. And without them being the catalyst for me to understand myself, I wouldn't be making art right now, you know? So at this point in time, with whatever concept of time that we kind of follow along, being with my family has been something that has allowed me to kind of pull back that catapult. And they've given me that energy to say, bro, you can do this. You got this. Like, you have this in your life. We're here to support you. And it's ultimately leading up to opportunities like this where we get to sit down, and this could be the moment that we release that catapult and I, you know, leave South Carolina, but the impact that has been left here, people could still come back and say, well, this 22 South Carolinians exhibition is something that you did early into your career, but now you're in the MoMA. And it's very humbling to understand and appreciate those things. You know, when you introduced me, you said, I said it because you're reading my bio, that organic growth is my thing. I'm here for organic growth. You know, you could easily go to New York and find the next person that wants to just bandwagon off of your art and run you dry until you're gone. But to sit down and say that you've literally taken your bricks and you've made them the size that you want to make them, and you found that plot of land that you want, because we're in the South and it's a lot of land, and you can consistently just build and build and build and build and build. If that's your land, nobody can take your land from you, and you can get land in another place, you know? So for me, that's still a form of ownership and taking it back. And although I am a young artist, I understand that you can create change within your community. And from that change, you can go to other communities, because community isn't a location. Community is a feeling. Community is a sentiment that people feel whenever they believe in you. And one person can create a community, and that community can become something larger than that one person, you know? And with Black people in general, that is literally what a lot of our foundation are. Most of our heroes, the only time we get to celebrate is when we mourn heroes, I feel, as opposed to being able to feel growth and love and warmth within your own home, being able to cry within your own home, as opposed to being able to cry whenever your favorite Black celebrity who you never met passes away. So for me personally, I like tangible, real life change, you know, and it doesn't happen overnight, but it's real, you know. I hate hearing about passings of people in different locations and things like that, but for me personally, it's my responsibility to make sure that my home front is safe, so we can cause those and create those conversations. And when we create those conversations on a smaller level, they develop on a larger level. But then we also have Black Supreme Court justices who are creating forced change on a larger level, and that's all of us working together to create a certain change. And if I can do that within my community, I don't feel comfortable doing that in another community. I couldn't go move to Chicago and blow up as an artist and still look back at my family who doesn't have anything, and look back at a community that does not have representation. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that as an artist. And I'm not saying that the artist that you mentioned did that, but he may have found that community from going somewhere. I found that community here, and that's something that I choose to build here. So I'm very happy to do that here. And that's my responsibility as a man, to build where I'm at, and we can go from there, you know? But I have to say that what I have right now is mine, and I'm developing it, you know? So eventually we may leave South Carolina, but right now it's my responsibility to do some work here, you know?
All right. Oh man. To like, yeah. Yeah, thank you. Oh man. Family. So first thing I would like to say, I look at Eastover as my Eastover is my home. I'm from Eastover. I never lived anywhere beyond Richland County or whatever. My mind is different. It's beyond that. But I take it with pride. And also as far as family, oh my God, being rooted. I'm super thankful. I'm gonna go ahead and go straight to the pivotal moment. 2017, I was really thinking about going to New York City, just as many artists, after being a photographer here in the Columbia area for so many years. I don't know how in the world I cashed out my retirement money. Something to never do. I can write a book about things not to do as an artist. Remind me to do that someday in the future. But I cashed my retirement, and I could have moved to New York, but somehow I stayed home here in Eastover. I don't know why. I moved back to Eastover and tried so many different situations to try to make Columbia work as a full-time artist. And I ended up moving back to Eastover. So this whole thing about New York, I love the lifestyle of New York. I love the density. I love being around other artists. And I love the whole walking and biking all over the place and taking public transportation and all of that. So instead of like in the High Line and all this stuff, so many things in New York you can just go on and on about. Just as a photographer, I use the same lens as I value another place. I took that same lens back to Eastover, a place that I grew up in. Some people be like, man, I see the same old store, the same old drunks and all that. I see something totally different. In my vision, I see opportunity. I wish I can turn it off. I have to turn it off sometimes. But I went back to Eastover and I looked at Eastover as New York City, or in the follow-up to Black Panther at that time, I look at Eastover as baby Wakanda or whatever, because it's 98% Black. There's only 800 people in the town limits. The zip code is more 50-50 or maybe like a 60-40 ratio split. So I took that same lens, that same energy that I had for New York, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm about to give it. I'm in Eastover now. I moved to the middle of the town. I grew up in the rural part of the town, growing up with the chickens and the goats and the gardening and all of that. And I took myself to the core of the town where there's more, it's horseshoe culture that I'm finding out. So it was like, I'm like a whole new child. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know about this stuff. Horseshoe culture is really big in Eastover. Do y'all know that? Right. So I'm with this new eye, with this new lens, I'm finding all of this stuff out. What is valuable to our culture? I'm looking at everyday habits of people. What could be built here? So I moved to the town. All of my work is in Eastover. I shifted all of my work from Columbia. I still do some work here and there in Columbia, but I shifted my work to Eastover. I work at the local library. The community garden that I started in 2014, I restarted that. Just got a $70,000 grant from the USDA. Clap. Okay, y'all don't have to clap. But yeah. But made that happen for the town government. I started their first newsletter. I do their photography. I do their social media. So I kind of like just threw myself as an artist. I was like, okay, I could have went to the military. I could have went to service. I could have went to AmeriCorps. I could have went to a country in another continent and did some work and dig some wells. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to take my artist skills back home because it's the opposite thing to do. And I'm usually the same person that encouraged people to get the heck out of South Carolina as an artist. I'm that same person. But if you have that special formula and you don't mind being a little reckless, getting a little beat up or whatever like that, I was like, go ahead and do it in South Carolina. You got a day job. Hold on to that day job. Bootstrap the heck, whatever you doing. Like, if you can make it jump, and then whenever you can, like, fly free again, or whatever. Just be smart about it. Be wise about it. Do whatever you got to do. But South Carolina is a different beast in itself. But South Carolina is one of those places. I look at South Carolina like gold. I look at South Carolina is my New York right now. South Carolina is my Wakanda. I look at South Carolina as the polar, the vortex of so much talent that usually leave. And you don't even know that they come from South Carolina. You don't even know their roots could be through the Great Migration of the 60s, the 70s, 50s, 40s, and all of that. So there's so much in South Carolina, so much unlocked potential. So instead of me going to New York City looking for a blank canvas, my blank canvas is Eastover. And I get to it right now. I'm just like, okay, I can do this consistently. I'm 36 years old, so I'm not as reckless as I used to be. I want a stable life. I got a baby on the way, so I want a stable life. So I'm taking my time, but at the same time, I can go around in the town and hit people up, be like, okay, I need you to do this. Could you help me with this? Could y'all show up for this? And it's a process. It's a selling process. And a lot of people are not jumping on quickly. But and it's the very counterintuitive thing to do, but I'm sticking to the process. It's my current project. It's my current assignment. Will I be in Eastover for the rest of my life? I don't know. I don't know what the Most High has for me, but it's my current assignment, and I'm going to give it all that I got. And I'm very thankful that I'm able to do all of my work is in one city block in Eastover. Is in like 3/4 of a city block. Everything that I do, the library, the community garden, and the town hall, those relationships, I just wanted to be able to put my hands on everything when I need to. I can talk to the mayor when I want to. I can talk to the guy who's drinking when I want to, or my old classmate that used to be a bully and now he may be schizophrenic right now. I can talk to him. So being able to have that proximity, that local proximity, that is my New York. That is my bike lane. That is the walk-in. I treat it, that is my high line when I walk around the 2 main streets in Eastover. I visualize it with that lens and I see so much value. And I'm one of those, I'm like the evangelist who started my church. I'm laying hands. I hopefully, in an analogy, I'm laying hands on people. I'm like, yo, start some businesses. Like, you have this talent, do this. Just don't start another sports bar. We got enough alcohol going on. We got enough gambling going on. Do something innovative. You great at welding? Oh, okay. Okay, you're great at bootlegging? Maybe you should legalize. Go the legal route because mugs are making a killing right now with the brewery. So that's my I guess my role in Eastover right now, and treating it as New York and laying hands on people in a way to let them know, hey, do this. And I wanted to be and I'm gonna wrap it up with this. But lastly, I'm hoping that people who have left maybe find Eastover worth investing in. Maybe I can bring my business of 50 employees to Eastover, reinvest in Eastover, somewhere new. Maybe I want to start a trade school, and I consider myself the most unqualified person. I'm just the person who just sounded an alarm, but I want the people that are more qualified than me to come through and who can get these $1 million grants. The work that I do is I don't really think much about the work that I do because I know things can be larger with more people, more density, more minds coming together, more people wanting to work to make the work happen. So that whole fusion, stirring up the pot, stirring up to some good behind gumbo, to make some magic happen. And it's all for the long term.
Okay. Yes, please. Yes.
I think I would make exactly what I'm making now. But that's only because I'm extremely focused on only making what I truly want to make now. So even with that, like commissions in a perfect world, I feel like most artists probably would not take commissions. To give a very transparent answer, I don't know if that's the truth, but I don't think most artists would take commissions with someone telling them how to make what they make. Honestly, so for me, in an ideal world, I would have the ability to sustain myself while creating exactly what I want. So, I like the old masters. I love the old masters. I love how they had patrons. They had people who said specifically, dude, you have a gift. that should be shared with the world, and you should not be burdened by any of these other worldly issues. Like I said earlier in the talk, or one of my favorite things to say in general is, if I was a post office worker right now, my mama would love me the same still. She would not look at me any differently. So it's my responsibility to do what I have no other option to do. So in a perfect world, I'm given the ability to do that without the financial strains or the life burdens. You know, like my ideal situation is me and my lover in the woods, in the mountains, with a blank easel and a blank canvas, and I just get to create art. So that's my ideal. If the world was perfect and I was able to do what I want to do, I would sit in the house and I would paint all day. And I feel like a lot of artists would do that. I don't make art for money, so I wouldn't, you know, I don't have an ideal commission as opposed to an ideal lifestyle, which would be just continuing to make art. So I live the dream now, honestly. And the second question, could you repeat it for me? A person. Because if I stopped making art right now, I would still be here and I wouldn't label myself as a creator or a maker. You know, like you said, God is the ultimate creator. I could never fill his shoes. I would never even attempt to, because he gave me this gift that I have now. So I'm a person and he gave me a very great blessing, one that I intend to use. And if I could use it exactly how I want to, I would be in the woods paying, not getting paid, but just paying.
Okay, first question. I feel the same. If life didn't get in the way, we would just be in there painting. But at the end of the day, we don't a lot of times have patrons, so we have to do a lot of business stuff behind. If we don't have our family like there supporting us, you know, we have to get grants. We have to wait for funds to come to, you know, buy our supplies or whatever we need. And that would be the ultimate. And then to do what you want to do. I find a lot of times that, speaking of that, I had a big commission to do this huge mural in Louisiana, in New Orleans. And I came up with the idea about doing it for a huge, they have a citywide show that comes every other year called Prospect. And so the curator picked curators. He said, oh, this would be great because of the theme. And we were doing a social justice piece. And what I was doing, at first I was calling it a gun mural. Then I changed it. I said, no, this is going to be a life mural, right? But we were going to be working with juveniles and other people who are prisoners and teaming them up with other artists. And it would probably be at least 100 different people working on this mural because it was a huge span. And I wanted to do the history of New Orleans as it pertains, you know, to guns, and how New Orleans changed. They had dueling grounds. I mean, they took the land from the Indians because of guns. So it was a transformation of how we've gotten to this point with guns. And I wanted to be about choosing life. And that project didn't come through because of funds. I still have the sketches. I still am working on it. I'm still hoping that one day, you know, there's a new administration at that particular time. The mayor and the sheriff weren't getting along. It was the sheriff's wall. And I was thinking to myself, why don't I have the money to do this? This is something that people will pass by and look at. And then we're giving opportunities to youths that are in the system that are using guns, and we are promoting their art talent, and also, you know, having universities come, because I was working with different universities and having the art department come and maybe even challenge them to see if they could maybe, once they got a certain point or through high school, they might have an opportunity to apply to the universities for art. To get a degree in art. So it was a wonderful, wonderful program. But guess what the problem was? No funding. So that's a lot of obstacles for artists. And sometimes artists, they're depressed about it and they put things to the side. It's like, oh my God, I don't have, you know, whatever the inspiration to do this, that, and the other. But as you were saying, are you a creator or a maker? I have this one story, and it's something that happened to me young. So right before the gallery showing, I was waiting tables, and people would come up to me and say, oh, you know, just having conversation. I said, well, I'm an artist. Oh, well, what kind of art? And I would get frustrated because the people at the restaurant loved that I waited tables so well. They got all these compliments. They kept wanting me to work full-time. I said, I don't need to work full-time. I'm making enough money to work part-time. I need to do my art. So I decided to just cut it out altogether. And I had a huge show that was going to take place at Madam C.J. Walker's mansion. They were redoing it in Irvington, and someone saw my artwork and they said, we want your paintings in the showroom. I didn't have $1, and it doesn't matter. I mean, I tried to sell so much for like a month and a half. Nothing was happening. And I was like, oh my goodness, I can't get these paintings to New York. Like, how am I going to do this? And I swear I fell on my knees and I said, if I could just sell one painting to get the paintings to New York, this would be great. So I had some clients that had purchased some stuff from me. And what happened was they had some damage to one piece and they were coming in town and to get the other piece. And so before they came to my studio, I was just like, I need a sign. I said, maybe I need to wait tables again. You know, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe this is not my calling. Maybe this degree in art is really not for me. And I said, gosh, if they could just get one thing. And they had already purchased what they were coming to get. Literally, they came in, they were like, oh, which paintings are going to New York? And I was like, oh, this one is going. And I was pretending like, you know, I had the money to send it. And I was just like, oh, yes. And this, that, and the other. And she's like, oh, my goodness. She said, well, how much is this one? How much? And they were like, okay. And I said, yeah, I really appreciate it. And I was trying to act like I wasn't pressed about them buying anything. But literally, they ended up giving me like a $7,000 check for 2 big paintings. And it's like, don't worry about it. Just ship it to us after it comes from New York. And we may even fly up there. And I just was like, tears after they left were rolling down my eyes. So I always feel like God is, you know, if it's your calling, no matter what it is, art, you're going to find out. And I've never, ever, ever questioned my purpose here. So I'm like you. I'm just an artist. He's the one running the show.
Okay, yes, please. And then we got to wrap it up.
All right, sounds good. In a perfect world, I do everything without money that I'm already doing without money. One thing, growing up as a little child, I always had an imagination of cities and all of that, how organized the cities and all that type of stuff. So, but for Eastover, for my current assignment in a perfect world, because I'm one of those people, if you ask like, what's your favorite food? I have a whole list for you. I just don't have one to have a whole lot. Like, where would you like to travel to next? I have a whole list. I'm like, I had to go by continent by continent. I'm one of those people. I just love everything. So, and I forgot the question. Ideal world, ideal gig. I know this is nothing related with the arts, maybe a little to do with the arts. I like to open up a post-secondary institution in Eastover. That's one like down the road goal. Some type of post-secondary institution. Could it be touching on trade school? Could it be touching on whatever that's applicable to Eastover, to the talents, to the gifts in Eastover, to that demographic? That's one goal. But as an artist, when I think of myself as an artist, I would be gardening all day. I would probably be dancing at somebody's party. I love being the life of somebody's party. That would probably be a gig in another life for me. But I just like being all over the place. I like being that kind of like a diplomat in some type of way, and also your tour guide or whatever like that. And I may ruffle some feathers, but at the same time, I can be the peacemaker. However, peace must be made. So I love that role. I would just do it without money. But fortunately, we're in a capitalistic society. We must do it for the money. And to address your second question, in the context of when we're not talking about God, when we're talking on just a human level, I consider myself a creator. In some ways, a photo creator. I'm very intimidated by real painters that I'm surrounded by right now. So that takes some work. Creator. So yeah, in the context of people, yeah, I consider myself a creator and all of that. Well, when it comes to the context, to the grand, big G-O-D, I'm not a creator. Yeah, I'm sitting back. I'm just one of them kids that he talk about. Like, I'm just one of his vessels. Like, I hope he hold me together, that he can still pour some more water into. Like, I'm just glad to be used. That's definitely my ego check. My message that I produce as a human being, as a man, it humbles me, because I was like, man, this is definitely human light or whatever. And then there may be a whole grand scheme with the mistakes and with the journey that we go through with the whole process, that mystery, that overall plan, and all of that, and watching out on us. It's just, we can't even fathom how God thinks. So I love that, and I love how different people interpret God around the world. Not trying to go too deep, but I love that. It just brings so much joy to me. How different land, God, like different denominations within the Christian church, Pentecostal holiness, or I go to AME, I love their church. I go to a UMC church, I'm like, oh God, I love this. And I love the new trends of churches right now, of the mega churches, the churches that's online, with the great marketing schemes and all that, all arts everywhere. But I definitely give it up. I don't consider myself a creator when it comes to the context of God or anything biblical or anything religious. When I think about the universe and how's everything, I might be just a piece of sand or whatever out of everything, and I appreciate it, but I want to be a purposeful piece of sand. I just doing my job, and I think, and I love my job. I love my job. Before I hit 30 years old, I was like, I want to be doing everything that I love, and I'm doing it right now. It's not the flashiest. It doesn't look good on IG. I'm terrible at social media, but as far as life, I feel a satisfaction. Like, okay, I'm doing my job. I'm doing my purpose. Okay, cool. It might leave some residual after I pass away and all of that. If I get a statue, if somebody forgets me and they just take the garden idea and the talents and all that, that's cool too, because it's spiritual. My spirit is internal. So I love when I think of God, I'm like, man, it just humbles me. It's like, man, God, you did this. Like that's, I have a very casual conversation with God, and also a very casual surrender. And but it's also, I think it's like, I don't want to jump in the Bible too much, but I think about Paul with the thorn in the flesh that keeps you humble. And I appreciate that human struggle. I appreciate, there's so much art in the human experience, and as it develops, the history of it, as we go in the future, there's so much there's so much richness in that. And I'm just, like I said, I'm just annoyed by my own lens. But I'm very thankful to see all of this, the richness of all of it. And I know things take time, and I'm just doing my part.
Thank you.